Okay, and we're live. Welcome back, fellow football fanatics. It's college football with Sam, and we are on with Marcus Maselli, also known as Marquishimo, with his Florida State YouTube highlights channel. Please check out his channel and give him a subscription. You can just click on either the title of this video or the description with his name box, and his channel will pop up. Please give him a subscribe and watch his most recent video. We're having him on here to talk about Florida State versus Louisville, and we'll also touch on other conference championship games throughout the entire college football, as you could say, universe. Don't know what other word to put in there. And we'll also talk about some playoff scenarios as well, because this game's pretty important, not just for the ACC, but also for every conference. Every conference that is fielding a playoff participant or a potential playoff participant. If Florida State is to lose to Louisville, that opens up a gaping hole for some team to slip in. If Florida State wins based off of how they've been ranked this most recent college football playoff ranking, in spite of Travis's injury, I'd say they're a lock to get in. Wouldn't you agree with that?
For sure, for sure.
Exactly. So this game has a lot of ramifications, not just for how Florida State is viewed. If they win this game, I'd say it's safe to say they're officially back, regardless what happens in the playoffs. They're back. First 13-win season since 2014. First ACC Championship Game appearance and victory since 2014. This game means a lot. So that's why we're talking about this ACC title game on a mostly Big Ten channel. So, welcome back, everyone, and let's get started. What do you think are the keys to winning this matchup for Florida State? Let's start there.
Keys are winning for Florida State. So, to me, it starts with getting stops on Louisville because this Florida State team, they've shown who they are through the season. They play most of their games the same way. They start slow on offense, they get a feel, and on defense, they play that bend but don't break. And then they go into halftime, usually down by one possession or maybe up by one possession, and then on defense, completely shut down the other team in the second half, and then on offense, find enough explosive plays to start running away with it. So Florida State has 8 fourth quarter shutouts in their last 9 games, which is a big piece of if they don't if they're only down by 3 points going into halftime, and then in the second half and especially the fourth quarter the other team doesn't score, you have a really good chance of winning. But the caveat to that stat, right? Because you can have stats prove anything, right? So they have 8 fourth quarter shutouts in their last 9 games. They haven't played a healthy starting quarterback since the first game of that, which was Clemson.
Wow.
So since Cade Klubnik in Clemson, which took them to overtime, by the way, um, they have played all injured or backup quarterbacks, and Jack Plummer, while limited, is not injured or a backup. So Florida State will have to. This will be the best offense they've played since the LSU game, and they'll have to play like they did in the LSU game, because if Florida State gets down by 20 to Louisville, they can shut Louisville out in the second half, and I don't think Florida State's coming back from 20. You know what I mean? So if they play their
Absolutely.
game where they get down, if they're playing a better offense than they normally do and they get down by more, they may not be able to come back from that. So the way they beat LSU and limited LSU's number one offense was they won on the margins. They stopped LSU in the red zone and on fourth down. They let LSU get a ton of yards. You can look up the box score. LSU had a ton of yards, but they stopped LSU on fourth down. They stopped LSU in the red zone and kept themselves in that game enough to pull away in the third and fourth quarter.
Yeah, didn't they have two fourth down stops in the first half where
Yeah.
they stoned them basically inside of the 10?
Yeah, there was one that was more near the 20. It was in the red zone. There was a goal line one that also had a penalty, so it was like a 7 play goal line stand type thing. And there was another one that was about the 15.
Yeah, and then they completely shut down LSU in the second half, and that was, I'd argue, Jaden Daniels' probably worst game of the season. I mean, he has torn up every other defense that he has played, and especially at secondary, you see that Florida State has. They have that type of defense, that emphasized because whether it's Central Cyprus or other players, that they're really good there. They were able to shut down and limit Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas. SFS
Exactly.
Inverted says Ohio State to the playoffs. I wish. Do you think that Ohio State would only need a Florida State loss, given how high they're ranked despite their defeat? Or do you think they need more to get into the playoffs?
I think I think they need more than that. I mean, because Florida, it obviously depends. The main problem area, right? The worst case scenario for, I guess, the committee is if Florida State wins and Alabama wins,
Oh, yeah.
because then you have trouble. But for Ohio State, do they get in over Texas if Texas wins? I think that's up for debate, right? Because Oklahoma State doesn't really move. With beating Oklahoma State doesn't really move the meter for Texas, right?
No.
But it's not like a huge win, right? But I think it depends how they beat Oklahoma State.
Yeah. And I would rather lose to Michigan on the road by 6 than lose to an Oklahoma team that just has looked like crap half the
Yeah,
time in a neutral site. Like,
yeah,
the committee has proven they care more about having the better loss than having the better win. And part of me understands that because part of me values that more. Because you can get a big upset win. You can do that. You can be this largely inferior team, get a big win, and it's a total upset. That's what Oklahoma was over Texas.
yeah,
And that's how it should be in part for the playoff. Like, Texas should get in over Ohio State. Like, you should care more about the big win because that's how you control your destiny. You control your destiny by winning, not by, trying to have the closest possible loss.
yeah,
But I'm a power rankings guy. So close losses to me are more of an indication of consistency. If you
yeah.
don't have too many of them, a big win can be a total fluke. But I totally agree with you. You're a Florida State fan. You're very knowledgeable about Florida State. That's why I'm having you on here. You're very knowledgeable about the ACC, much more than I could be. How much does Jordan Travis's injury impact this team? Is it, you think it's over exaggerated by people, under exaggerated? What's the difference between Travis and Roadmaker?
Yeah, I think that's a great question because this season, for someone who's followed them closely, and really probably for anyone who's followed Florida State closely, the key to the team actually has been the defense this year, which is not typically how it was. A lot of Florida State fans wanted the defensive coordinator fired after last season, actually. So Jordan Travis in no way has carried Florida State this season. He was worse than he was last season. Um, and even like the LSU game, Jordan Travis was not the reason they beat LSU. So at the same time, though, Travis keeps composure. He knows how to distribute to the playmakers, and the coaching staff is much more comfortable with Travis in there. I mean, being a 6 year guy, they can call anything. They can go into any away game, and he'll be cool and collected. And so he really opens the playbook a lot. I think that's the main difference. Obviously, he's more talented than Rodemaker, but this season he wasn't lighting the world on fire. But
Yeah.
the main thing to me is the playbook. The main thing I saw in the Florida game was it was very evident Norvell and Atkins, who call the plays, were trying to make things simple for Rodemaker. They weren't good at making things easy for Rodemaker. So they do a lot of one read things or sprint out. A lot of times sprint out to the left, which is a hard throw for a quarterback, for a right-handed quarterback. And so Rodemaker did not play well. He didn't play horrible, right? But he didn't play great, and a lot of it, they put the training wheels on the offense for him.
Yeah.
And so even if Travis wasn't going to actually win the Heisman this year, there's just the comfortability is way higher with Travis.
Absolutely. And it was, like you said, the defense that is Florida State's mojo this year. I mean, they held Florida to negative yardage and beat up their offense in that second half, which allowed, along with undisciplinary actions from Florida, allowed Florida State to come back in after being down by double digits and pull out with a win. Am I correct in that? That's what I heard, at least.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
Okay.
the way the offense was, even Trey Benson actually said it in the post game. He said the coaches kept telling me I get 2 yard game because I know the 30-yard run's going to come.
Yeah.
So that's how the offense has been. It's you just survive, right? And then you'll eventually pop a big play, pop an explosive play, and the defense will let you hang around in it and then completely put their foot on the throat of the opponent in the second half to where they don't score anything and Florida State has two big explosive plays and pulls away.
Yeah, Florida State is this team that offensively to me almost seems either dysfunctional or they get a big play. It
That's accurate.
reminds me a lot of Penn State last year with Clifford, and when their running backs were having more success, it'd either be big plays, touchdowns, or punts. It would not be much in between. But that's from a Big Ten angle. What fascinates me, I guess, here, and I'm pausing because part of me doesn't know what to think in this game. On one hand, Florida State's starting quarterback is injured, and obviously is it Rodemaker or Roadmaker? How do you pronounce it?
I've always said Rodemaker. I'm not sure there's a consensus.
Okay, I'll stick with Roadmaker, but I'm probably wrong. The playbook has to be simplified for him. He doesn't have the same experience.
Yeah.
He doesn't have the same athleticism either, right? Or can he run just like Travis?
Not just like Travis, but I would say for this season, you never saw, like, if you watched the Florida game from last season with Travis, that was the last time that Jordan Travis was ever there. Travis was hurt, was like banged up a lot this season, and never really. I honestly think the coaching staff was saving Travis's legs for late in the season or playoff games, and he didn't. He got hurt before that happened, so
Yeah.
we never really saw him run it. That wasn't a big part of the offense, and so to me, like, you're not losing that element of the offense because it wasn't
Okay.
there this season.
Okay.
But he can scramble. He can scramble for sure.
Okay, so he's more mobile than Kyle McCord. Okay, well that's
Yeah,
it.
he may be a skinny, tall, lanky guy, but he can actually run pretty good.
Okay, that's good then. You don't want a Kyle McCord in modern college football, at least in a mobility sense.
No.
Like throwing sense, I think he's a better thrower than most people give him credit for, but with that not mobility, it makes him kind of one-dimensional, and that's not good.
Yeah.
On one hand, inexperience at quarterback, but then for Louisville, they turn the ball over a ton. They're a more consistent rushing attack than Florida State, but explosiveness probably still goes to the Seminoles. And Florida State's just deeper of a team. You told me, I'm going to spoil it for the audience, originally that you're leaning Louisville to win. And while I understand the sentiment, and I know Josh Pate picked Louisville to win, part of me doesn't get it. Like, why are you? Explain to me why you think, or at least why you thought, if your opinions change now, that Louisville will win. And we'll get to the chat in a few minutes as well. Hang on if you have chats.
So there's a couple things. Rodemaker has avoided the disastrous play. Florida State doesn't turn the ball over. It's going to happen, I think. And they preach it so much to just not. Florida State wants so badly to just punt or score, and they don't mind punting, but The defensive line for Louisville, I think, is good enough to force the disastrous play from Florida State in a game where Florida State's offense, I don't believe, can survive too many disastrous plays. So if they get a sack fumble that sets them up at the 20, that sets up, extra possession touchdown, Florida State plays to hang in there and then pull away in the second half. Louisville is a second half team. They play all these one possession games. They win most of them. They're 5-1 in one possession games this season. So I'm not sure that matches up with Florida State's game too well, right? They play to wear you down and then pull away. Louisville doesn't go away, and they have a defensive line that doesn't go away. And a couple other things. Jeff Brom, I really respect as a coach. He can scheme up. I don't have the numbers, but I've heard he's very good against man coverage, and that's almost exclusively what Florida State plays. Jamari Thrash is getting healthier. He's their force feed wide receiver. He has more than double the yards and catches as their next receiver. So with him healthy, they have an actual quarterback playing. Jack Plummer is not great, right? But he's not injured or a backup, which is something Florida State hasn't seen since like early October or something like that.
Yeah.
And also this Louisville team, the players, not the coaches, but the players lost to Tate Rodemaker last season at home. And there's no way they underestimate him.
That's
so
true.
They're going to be hungry to hit him. And the last factor, which isn't a real thing, maybe it is, the Louisville boomerang factor, I'm calling it. They've been up and down, back and forth. And they were down last week. They were kind of down the 2 weeks before that. They're going to be ready, I think. So I just don't think Florida State has the luxury at the end of the day to wait around for the second half. If Louisville goes up 20-3 or something, I don't think Florida State has the offense to come back to wait that long.
Not to make another Big Ten analogy, but you're saying that if Florida State gets in like a Michigan TCU spot, that would be an abject disaster, given how Jeff Brom can scheme against the defense. That if you're Florida State, you don't want to get too far behind.
For sure.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Those are very good reasons. I just pulled up some statistics for both teams. Both have 30 sacks or more. Both have around 10 interceptions defensively. Both have around 10 forced fumbles, and the tackle numbers are pretty similar, though Florida State has about 130 exactly more tackles, which I assume means that their defense is often on the field longer, or they don't give up as many big plays. I'm going to double check that real quick. Okay, well, I'll confirm that. Yeah, Louisville on average is 32 minutes and 9 seconds of possession. Florida State's only 29. Yeah, that's actually a pretty decent difference in TOP. That's a fair difference, actually. Yeah. What are you thinking right now? Because you said that pre-show, but maybe you've changed your mind. Like, who do you lean right now to win?
It's really tough. I'm going to stick with my gut on this one. I don't trust that Florida State will, to be honest, open the offense up enough for Tate, because he can throw it downfield. He's really good in the middle of the field RPO game. They only ran like one or two of those against Florida, and they actually missed the throw on it. So I think they won't open up the offense until it's too late, because they forced negative yards from Florida in the fourth quarter. I believe they had negative yards in the first quarter against Florida. And Florida's defense is actually horrible. So if you play Louisville, I think they'll get the disastrous play. And Louisville's offense is certainly better than Florida's was last week. So Louisville will be able to build a bigger lead, and Florida State doesn't have the luxury to mess around. And so they may open it up late and, throw it late, but I don't think it'll be enough.
Okay. Understandable. Did you pick Florida to beat Florida State, like mentally, before the game happened?
No.
Okay, good. Um, I heard a lot of people picking Florida, and if Graham Mertz was healthy, I probably would have. No, not backup quarterback Florida. No,
And
there's
their
no way.
offensive line. They had a tackle out, and you saw their line got
Oh,
abused.
yeah. No, I mean, okay, good. I think maybe I'm wrong on your end. You have good reasons for picking Louisville. I think a lot of people are putting, and maybe for you too, since you're a fan. I mean, the emotions. Part of the emotions were telling me to pick Ohio State to beat us, and I'm glad I didn't listen to that. I think picking Louisville, there's logic behind it, but I think that Florida State is just better on both sides of the football, and they have that higher ceiling. And I mean, Josh Pate picked Florida to beat Florida State, and then he's picking Louisville to beat Florida State.
Yeah.
I think that's an example of, I think the loss to Jordan Travis is being taken perhaps more seriously by a lot of people. I mean, I'm praying and hoping that he heals. However, when looking at predictions and trying to predict games, you have to like assess how important a player actually is, and he's very important for like a playoff game. I have a hard time seeing Florida win a playoff game without him. Then again, like you said, it's the defense and it's also his wide receiver core. Florida State is a ridiculously good wide receiver core that's healthy right now, unlike
Yep.
against Pitt. I have to lean Florida State. I think that they find ways to win. Part of me thinks they've played bored at times and they mess around. Sometimes they're like the kid that procrastinates on his homework, but he's really smart. He just kicks the can down the road and then can do an essay at 2 or 3 a.m. and get an A on it because he's just that good. And I
Yeah.
think that Florida State's going to bring out their best scheme here, and I think they're going to win. But before we finish talking about this, I think that both rushing offenses and rushing defenses will determine who wins this game. What do you think about that statement?
I think that makes a lot of sense because Florida State and Mike Norvell, they would love to be a running team. That's where they would like to be. They haven't been able to do that this season, but that's where they want to be. They're still going to try. They're still going to try to stay with it because they know they hit two or three, and then they hit 30, 40. So they're going to try to pound it out, eventually hit the long one, keep it off the Rodemaker. So exactly. So Louisville, if they can stop that, that's going to be huge. And certainly for Florida State, stopping Jordan, stopping Garendo is going to be really important. And Louisville really doesn't want to rely on Jack Plummer ever. They go out of their way to not rely on him. So I think you're absolutely right. That's the key for both teams on both sides.
Yeah, they've passed the ball 100 and am I reading this correctly? Yeah, they're passing the ball 107 times less than running on the season. Louisville is, and that's weird for a Jeff Brom team. You go back to his days at Purdue, outside of maybe DJ Knox in 2018 and maybe Devin Mockabee last year, they never had consistency at running back. They were like Washington, who
Yeah.
now Washington's the wide receivers coach, associate head coach, and passing game coordinator Jamarcus Shepard was on Jeff Brom's staff. They would pass to chew clock. They would not run to chew clock. They would pass essentially
Yeah.
to run. It was weird, and Washington does it today. This is not a typical Jeff Brom team. I mean, but what he's doing works. He's a genius. Jawar Jordan's averaging 6.4 yards per carry with 1,076 rushing yards. Louisville in total's averaging nearly 5 yards per carry. Compare that here to Florida State, and Florida State's averaging 4.8 yards per carry. Trey Benson's averaging 6.1 yards per carry, but they get a lot more big runs. A lot more big runs than they do short and intermediate consistent ones. But yeah, I'm in full agreement with you.
Absolutely. So I had to plug in my laptop there. We're about to run out of battery.
Oh, that'll happen to mine. It's a gaming laptop. It's an Alienware. It's like a complete tank. But if you leave it unplugged and you do anything with it for more than 30 minutes, it dies.
Yeah.
Okay, we're gonna check the chat. Thank you, Frank Carone 6 says Sam's very intelligent. I love this show. Well, I love it too. Hopefully we can grow our audience continually throughout the season. SFS Inverted agreed with your point, Marcus, about needing more teams to lose for OSU to get in. He said Oregon, Texas, they need to lose, Florida State needs to lose, and Georgia needs to beat Alabama. I'm in full agreement with that. Someone says, do you think that Oregon will jump Florida State if both Oregon and Florida State win? My answer, that's yes. What do you think?
I think it depends how Florida State wins. I think it's down to that. I think certainly, again, in most circumstances, if Oregon wins, they're guaranteed in pretty much no matter what. If they beat Washington, they're in. Um, if Florida State pulls, like Ohio State did back in 2014, where they go in the conference championship game as a close dog or a close favorite, and then go out 59-0. Oregon's not jumping Florida State if they blow out Louisville, but if they play Louisville like they played Florida, I certainly could see Oregon jumping them for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially given, look, the ACC, we saw it with Georgia Tech, Kentucky, Louisville, Clemson couldn't even score a single offensive touchdown against South Carolina.
Georgia Tech played Georgia close. I don't know what you're talking about.
Georgia rested.
I know.
they were more competitive than I would have expected, though. Them running the ball that way, I don't believe in any SEC defense. I think if the SEC is going to win the Natty this season, they're going to do it in like 50-40 format in both games. I don't believe in their defenses. I believe in their offenses, especially Georgia's. That's an elite offense. But this year's Georgia team reminds me of last year's Ohio. No, they remind me of 2021 Ohio State, where their weakness was stopping the run, but they had a really good secondary. That's what this year's Georgia team reminds me of, like a 2021 Ohio State, except elite tight end play rather than elite receiver play. But yeah, I think that Oregon would jump FSU. I think the committee, if they could find an excuse, would keep Florida State out of the playoff, but they can't because that would be in violation of every principle that they've set up. Someone said, I hope Florida State wins so Michigan can play them. We'll come back.
That's what I said pre-show.
Yes, he said that pre-show. The same Michigan fan also said, I hope Ohio State wins their bowl game. I do too, and if Ohio State reaches the college football playoff and they're matched up with a team not named Michigan, I will be cheering for them to win too, so we can get an epic rematch. Let me see anything else. SFS Inverted said, McCord let us down because he's an Ohio State fan, but he's still human. People are attacking him and calling for his demise. Imagine how that feels. It's just football. Yeah, that's not appropriate whatsoever. And then finally, let me see. Gosh, this comment quickly got away. Trish Misselli. If FSU does not, if they win this game, how much do you think they can improve their offensive scheme with Rodemaker? That's a question that I want to tie in with the earlier one about Michigan, Florida State. Do you think they can win a playoff game, or do you think they can win it all if they make it? Like, do they have any shot to do any of that, or do you think that they're a sounding board for whoever meets up with them?
That's a good question. I'm going to tie that into something you said a couple minutes ago. You said you don't trust any SEC defenses, right? I know it's a Big Ten channel, so I want to be proven wrong, but I don't trust any Big Ten offenses.
That makes sense.
So, and I'm actually kind of with you on the SEC defenses, to be honest. I am, but I feel the same way about Big Ten offenses. So, if Florida State gets Washington, there's no way they're going to play Washington. But if that matchup happened, I would obviously think that's Florida State's best chance, or Texas. But again, I don't think that's going to happen just the way seeding would work.
Yeah.
Florida State's going to be 3 or 4 if they make it at all, right? And so that there's no way they would play Texas or Washington, most likely.
Yeah. Washington would be the most likely matchup. If Georgia loses and Washington and Michigan win, then you could get, 2 Washington versus 3 FSU.
Yeah.
And your comment about Big Ten offenses is understandable. I mean, the only Big Ten offense, I trust Ohio State's just because they have raw talent, but I trust them to be inconsistent, not to be this seamless piece of magic like they were the past 2 seasons. Michigan's I trust because it's consistent, but they don't have that explosiveness either. So maybe I don't know.
So yeah, my thing with that would be like if Florida State catches Michigan in a game, I'd say if you play the game 10 times, probably Michigan wins at 8 or 9 of them, right? But with the explosive plays, the way those work, if Florida State gets 3 of them, right, that could be all it could take. Exactly. Things could work out if Michigan's not consistently explosive enough and they play a team that somehow pops 3 or 4, that could happen. And I think to answer the question, it was about how could Florida State improve their offense for the playoff, right?
Yeah.
To me, it's just open up the playbook for Rodemaker and trust that he's going to do it. And if he can't do it, then you die by that. But to me, you can't go in scared, trying to simplify things too much. Rodemaker's not capable of going past his first read, or he's not capable yet, hasn't shown that he's capable, but he can take off and run. So I'd give him plays that have a chance to pop big and tell him if it's not there, take off, but don't hold the ball. A lot of stuff they called against Florida was one read and then it was just over and he just held the ball and got sacked or forced it and missed. But I don't know. I would say open it up and then teach him to not lose the game on it instead of put training wheels on it and make it just simple. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it absolutely does. And with Travis being injured, he now gets experience before you get that whole month of training. Like if Travis was going to be hurt no matter what, it would be preferable. It would have been more preferable for it to have happened then than against Louisville on like the third quarter, for example.
Absolutely.
I think that Florida State would be the most dangerous against a team. How good of a thrower is Rodemaker? Do you think that with his passing capabilities, it's the passing offense or the rushing offense that's more explosive?
With the receivers they have and the offensive line they have, it's passing offense because the run blocking, even with Travis, was never there this season. It's only been explosive runs, which is still what it was against Florida. It was only explosive runs, and then it was -2 yards or 1 yard pretty much every time. So Rodemaker can push it down the field. He has receivers that can make him right, even if he's a little wrong, right?
Yep.
So I think, he's shown the ability to push it downfield. In the Louisville game last season, he was down when he came in and came back on Louisville because he just threw it up to Johnny Wilson pretty much every time, and he came down with it. And there were a couple times he drew a pass interference. Like, he knows how to get it down there. If they get him in hard play action, he can really sling it. That's if they get any type of run game and can get play action off the run game, he has the ability and the arm to actually air it out.
Yeah, I think your team would match up best. The Seminoles would with probably Texas, and then Washington, Oregon. I'd say Texas is the best because they have some of the worst red zone play calling I've ever seen. That works pretty well with a bend but don't break defense.
Yeah,
and their secondary suspect. And then for
you
Oregon,
can't run on Texas at all, though, right?
No, but their secondary suspect and teams that love to go for it on fourth down, I think would have fits with your defense. I don't think that works out well. It's like Ohio State's defense. Very bend but don't break. The secondary's the better part. And even though their run defense isn't perfect, I think it's a lot better than Florida State's, for example. it was hard to run on them. Michigan was 3 of 3 on fourth down because they still have some kind of elite interior presence and they have Corum. Michigan's another team I think you all would match up well with because they allow explosive plays in the passing game. Run game not so much though. They would eat Florida State in terms of run and they could probably get some pressure. And they love to run the ball. So that wouldn't be as favorable, I think, as Texas and Washington and Oregon, but it'd be more favorable, I believe, than like Georgia, whose strength is pass defense and their offense is just nuts.
Agreed, totally agreed. Like it's not like you're going to suddenly run good against Georgia, even if Georgia's not elite at stopping the run. You're not going to
Exactly.
find it against them either. But they're really good against the pass, so you're not going to do that either. So I agree, that'd be a bad matchup.
Yeah, Michigan would match up well with Georgia because they don't get explosives like FSU, but they're
Yeah,
able to basically not every play, but they can consistently get 4 yards per carry and they'll force it down your throat on fourth down. And I think this Georgia defense would have a hard time stopping that. And
agreed.
Michigan, their defense, I honestly look at how they're built this season and it feels like they built themselves with what they could to match up well with Georgia, especially with how they played against Ohio State. I mean, Ohio State was able to get some sizable pass plays on them that I haven't seen them allow. Maybe part of that was the sign stealing, but it wasn't. Part of it was also just like the way the players covered. It was like the way the players played, not just how the plays were designed. But like Stover beat them over the top. Marvin Harrison Jr. was bracketed a ton, but every play he wasn't double covered. Boom. So it's really interesting. Let me check the chat one more time. What do you think about Kyle McCord? And then we'll get into talking about other conference championship games.
I'm sorry, what was the question?
What do you think of Kyle McCord?
I uh, I think Ohio State might be looking in the portal. I just I think you might have said this too, or it certainly seems like Ohio State built their team to kind of compete with Michigan, right? Because what they did wasn't working, where it's all offense and less defense, right? Now
Yep.
their defense, I think, is much better than it was, but McCord doesn't seem to be able to get them over the hump, in my opinion. But you're the Big Ten guy. I'm not the authority on McCord at all. So
I think that's a fair assessment. I think that they can win with McCord. I think for them the problems reside at offensive line, and also the fact that they changed their offensive scheme without needing to. I mean, I have clearly noticed a conscious decision to run the football more, even when it doesn't work, and even when that's your clear weakness, just so you can feel like you're as tough as Michigan is. That's what it feels like.
gotcha.
It's like they're not playing like Ohio State's strength, even with how inconsistent McCord is. It's pass, 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 because you have Stover, Harrison Jr., and Henderson could probably play a receiver out of the backfield role too with how explosive he is.
Yeah,
And then you pass to open up the run instead of the other way around. Like it was admirable that they were able to go down the field and run through Michigan's throat on that one drive, but they're not built to do that consistently. And I feel like Ryan Day should have only changed the defense and just left the offense the same way it was in 2021 rather than trying to do better in the ground game. Because I think I thought the passing offense and Stroud was never the problem. I mean, I thought it was the
yeah,
defense, and then
yeah.
Michigan's defense played perfect almost against Ohio State's offense, is playing that soft zone. But I don't know. It just was kind of my thought process, and I've been surprised that Day is consistently moving to like more of an archaic kind of offense. But part of that's also the quarterback and offensive line. Howdy do, Sam. Sorry I'm late. My mom went to the hospital today, so things have been really hectic. Well, we hope and pray that your mom is doing better, Chimichanga guy. Thank you for checking in. Challenger Gamer said, what jerseys will Michigan wear? Well, speaking of which, we'll get to that in a minute because we are going to flip over and we're going to talk about the championship games here before we let Marcus go off and have a great night. Okay, so New Mexico State at Liberty. Liberty's an 11-point favorite. Who are you taking?
I got New Mexico State, man.
You like Diego Pavia and what's the head coach's name? Gosh, I forget what his name is.
I don't remember either. Liberty is good for. I don't know about a stinker every year, but I think they don't have a loss yet, right?
No, they're undefeated.
Yeah, I think it's coming.
Understandable. They've played some pretty close games. I love Caden Salter, though. If for whatever reason he wants to transfer out and J.J. McCarthy declares for the draft, please bring him or someone with athleticism to Michigan. I don't like Pat. I don't like pro-style quarterbacks. I hate that. Okay, number 5, Oregon at number 3, Washington. Oregon is a massive 9.5-point favorite. That's big for a top 5 game. Neutral site, Washington's 12-0, Oregon's 11-1. The Ducks have looked a lot more dominant, but I think Washington is better at finding ways to win. I think a close game favors the Huskies, but that's not exactly my pick. What's your pick?
Yeah, I agree. Close game favors Washington, but first of all, do you think Penix is hurt or something is going on?
Yes, because ever since that Oregon game when he looked dinged up, he's not been the same player.
His stats have been a negative. I mean, just
yes.
Yeah. So I think Oregon's got him. I mean, I know people like to go eye test and say Oregon's great. Some people say, well, they haven't played anybody, so they're overrated. But I don't think Washington is going to beat them twice in the same season.
Yeah, I mean, I have questions. I have questions about Oregon. Oregon's an efficiency machine, but Michigan, even with their recent 3 games being close, they controlled every one of those games. They only surrendered a lead to Penn State actually in the first quarter, and they controlled the game the rest of the way through. Oregon's a lot like Michigan in terms of efficiency monster, but Michigan, even without their head coach, has had a tough string of games, and they win, and they obviously force teams to play catch up. I don't think Oregon has played much of anyone important in retrospect outside of Washington, but I think they win in a close game because depth favors them, and it's for Washington, it's hard to beat the better team twice, and that's what they're going to have to do because Oregon is the better team. Even if they have the worst strength of record, strength of schedule, look at any analytic, and I guarantee you whether it's points per play margin, yards per point margin, or ESPN efficiency or FPI, Oregon's significantly ahead. I mean, they literally look more Georgia than Georgia does right now. If you watch how they play. Yeah, I'm picking.
Yeah, and where's the weakness for Oregon, right? We know Washington's defense is at least not great, right?
Yep.
Oregon doesn't have that glaring thing that keeps them from putting teams away.
No. They have their pass defense. That's their weakness. And overall, their defense, I think, is suspect because it hasn't really been tested. But their pass defense would be their only weakness. See, I think Washington is a really good matchup advantage with them. But I just think Oregon's that good. So, picking them to win. Okie dokie. Saturday, December 2nd, we got Oklahoma State. The same team that just got destroyed by South Alabama. They're playing
UCF.
Texas. Oh, yeah, UCF too. How? Wasn't that 45-3? The team that just gets beaten to a pulp multiple times this season. They are playing Texas. Who do you have and why?
I got Texas, but not by a lot. Um, Gundy, I don't think is going to get blown out. Again, he's got blown out twice this year, so he could. But I think in a game where he needs it, I think he's going to have him ready. But no one can really run on Texas, and Oklahoma State needs to be able to run the ball. I think it's a bad matchup for them.
Yeah.
And I think Texas does it. They may not make the playoffs still, but I think they do win.
Yeah. I'm picking Texas. It's so painful to pick all of these favorites, but this has not been a year of upsets. It really it hasn't. Like there haven't been these chaotic whoa upsets this year. There haven't.
A lot of near misses, yeah.
Exactly. A lot of close games, a lot of entertaining games. It's been a very entertaining season. There has not been total break loose chaos. And I don't think that's going to happen here. Yeah, my pick is also Texas. Okay, the MAC championship game. Miami of Ohio playing Toledo. Toledo laying 8 points.
Miami lost their QB, right?
I don't know, but even if they didn't, Daquan Finn's pretty good, and he's Toledo's quarterback.
Okay, I can't remember exactly, but I'm pretty sure Miami Ohio's QB is out. Either way, I'm taking Toledo.
Yep. Penny Boone is also a really good running back. 15 rushing touchdowns, almost 1,400 rushing yards. Boise State playing UNLV. Even though Boise State's favored, I'm picking UNLV to win because I think
You should know Michigan killed UNLV, right?
yeah, and UNLV was actually one of the most efficient offenses we've played all season, which goes to show
That's
how
right.
awful Big Ten offenses are.
Exactly. Yeah, I'll agree with you on that one.
Yeah, UNLV. Okay, this might be the biggest championship game. I think Washington Oregon is bigger because I think that the best team in the Pac-12 championship game, Oregon, is better than the best team in the SEC championship game, Georgia. But I could be wrong there easily. Georgia is a 5.5 point favorite. They're 12-0, number one in America. Alabama is 11-1, but number 8. This was the identical record of the matchup in 2021. Except I believe Alabama was number 3 or number 4 despite being 11-1 because of how much chaos that had happened that season. Who are you picking in this game? I personally have Georgia.
Only because I've been picking it for maybe a month now, Alabama.
Okay.
I don't even think they're the better team. I just think it's I just think it's gonna happen. Carson Beck's got to have a bad game at some point. Uh,
Yeah.
and,
Georgia.
and even the Auburn game being close, kind of a bad performance from Alabama, right? I think they bounce back. Like I think Josh Pate said it right. Like that's not the team that's playing Georgia this week. It's
No,
not
listen.
the same team.
Probably not. No. And even if it
I,
is,
I, I hope it is actually, but
even if it is, that could still be a competitive game because remember, Georgia 27, Auburn 20, and Auburn
right.
was able to run down that team's throat. I think people say this is the national championship game. I don't think this is like 2021 where look, Georgia looked like the best team in the country until Alabama made them look pitiful in the SEC championship game. And I remember foolishly picking Michigan to beat Georgia that season. But at least I thought after that would happen, I thought that Alabama would beat Michigan in the national title. I thought that the winner of that game was indeed going to win it all, even though I wasn't nearly the same YouTuber that I am now.
Yeah. And I don't even think the people who say Alabama's a different team from when they lost to Texas, I think that's not even really true. Like the whole offensive explosion or whatever. Certainly Milrow's gotten better, but I'm not impressed by who they've played or even how they've done
No,
it. You can't use the LSU game as proof that you can score points. And LSU's defense was even banged up in that game, and
yeah,
everyone scores on LSU. So it's just not.
Yeah.
I'm not sure they're good. I just have a feeling they'll beat Georgia. I don't have a stat to back it up. I
Yep.
don't even think Alabama's that good, but
Yeah, like last year, even after Michigan beat OSU in the fashion they did, and even after the SEC championship game, eventually Georgia became my number one team. I didn't pick them to win it all in the preseason last year or the year before that, but at the end of championship week in both of those seasons, I had an SEC team winning it by that point because either just things changed along the way. My mind has not changed this season. If anything, what I've seen from Georgia, while it scares me because of how dominant they've looked at times, Auburn losing to New Mexico State, South Carolina being garbage, Tennessee, garbage. I don't know why they're still ranked. Kentucky sucks. I think I don't know. I think this is a battle of overrated teams that I think Georgia will win. But then again, it's Nick Saban. And if I face any of these teams in the playoffs, I will be scared because they have talent and because
yeah,
of their coaching staff. But
agreed.
with how they've performed so far this season, I don't like either of these teams. I really don't. And I think that Georgia being number one is just because people are scared of once again looking like idiots for not picking them to win the national title like last year and the prior year. Okay, so let's talk about this. We'll get to that question, SFS inverted. I'll leave it up on the screen, though, so other people can see. Okay. SMU at Tulane. Tulane, 3.5 point favorite. They're 11-1. SMU is 10-2. What do you think?
I'm going Tulane. Pratt's healthy, right? And
Yes.
then Stone is injured for SMU, I believe.
Ooh, he's hurt?
I
I
think
did
he
not
broke his
know
leg,
that.
right?
Let me see this. Oh, I'm showing that's on the wrong screen. Let me look on the other screen. Let me look that up. Continue with what you were saying.
Yeah. Um, I'm picking Tulane. I really want to pick SMU just because I think haven't they not finished in the top 25 since their death penalty in the 80s? Like they've I want them to be good again. They're joining the ACC next season.
Yeah.
Rhett Lashley's a good play caller, so they've got a chance certainly, and I want to see them succeed. I like Tulane though. I think they're a good team, continuing momentum from last year.
Yep.
I like SMU, but I love Tulane. Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense. And with what you told me about Preston Stone, I'm going to have to pick Tulane to win.
Yeah.
Yeah, they'll win. Okay, Appalachian State at Troy. Troy is the favorite, and that makes sense because they're 10-2 and App State's 8-4.
I'm going App State. Got to pick an underdog at some point. I've been picking all favorites, but um, again, two teams I respect a lot. Um, I don't have a reason to. Was it App State who finally beat James Madison?
Yes, it
Yeah,
was. And that game was not close until the end.
yeah. Doesn't James Madison have the number one run defense in the country
Yes, I'm pretty sure they do. It's
by
either
a long
them or
shot? I
it's
think
either them or Penn State.
something like that. I think App State when it matters pulls it out. I like Troy though. I mean, I understand why they're favored.
Yeah, you know what? I'll just to heck with it. Go with App State. Doesn't really matter outside of pride for the Sun Belt. Okay,
Yeah.
so a question that was asked is so let's talk about this. What happens if Michigan loses to Iowa somehow? What what do you think happens there?
Oh man. So I've done a lot of scenarios, maybe over 100. I've worked out and then uh, try to guess on what the committee will do.
Yeah.
And all the ones where Michigan loses to Iowa have been the toughest because it's kind of like the Alabama Georgia thing, where if Alabama wins, do you leave one or both of them out, right? Same thing with Michigan. If they lose, do you? It might come down to Michigan and Ohio State. Can you leave Michigan out if they have the head-to-head over Ohio State, but they're coming off a loss to Iowa, right?
Yeah.
So that's a tough question. It obviously depends who else loses, right? If it comes down to Michigan or Texas, right? What do you go with? I mean, Michigan, I think everyone would agree, looks better than Texas does. Certainly late, right? Certainly Michigan looks much better than Texas as of late. But if you lose to Iowa, I mean,
Exactly. For me, from my standpoint, if Michigan loses to Iowa, get out. Like, get out, don't return, season's
yeah,
over. Like, that, I would hate that. Only somehow winning it all would redeem that loss. And I've said that since the cheating scandal. If this team doesn't win it all, I'd be somewhat disappointed because we may not get back to this point, even with the 12-team playoff. That would be difficult because Ohio State has the head-to-head loss, so I'd assume they'd all. If Michigan loses, I think they'd get put in over Ohio State. I think Ohio State wants Michigan probably to win, honestly, so that whole head-to-head conversation doesn't have to happen.
yeah,
But then again, committee is valued who has the better loss. And that would be Ohio State. You'd rather lose to
yeah.
Michigan on the road by 6 than lose to Iowa neutral field, which would be pretty humiliating.
I think what would work for that, because there's a way you get both of them in pretty comfortably. If you have Michigan lose, but Georgia wins, Florida State loses, and Texas loses, because that way they both get in. You have Bama is out as a 2 loss, Texas is out as a 2 loss, and then either Washington with 1 loss, I think is behind Michigan. I'm not sure, maybe not. And certainly Oregon with 2 losses is behind, and certainly
Yeah.
Florida State with 1 loss is behind Michigan.
Oh, yeah.
So I think either of those, like I think the Pac-12 champion doesn't matter in that scenario. Because
Yeah.
I think Michigan and Ohio State both get in. I don't think you'll have 2 Pac-12 teams. What do you think? If Michigan loses and Washington loses, and it comes down to those two, who would get in?
Washington would deserve to get in because a loss to Oregon's much better than a loss to Iowa. But I don't
Okay.
know. I mean, I'm utterly convinced Michigan has to win if they want to get in because I don't know. I think a loss to Iowa dooms you. I will say though, I think Iowa is better than Louisville. So I think that, I think a loss to Louisville would be worse than a loss to Iowa, but that's not factoring in relative to team expectations. I think it would be a greater upset for Iowa to beat Michigan than Louisville to beat Florida State, but that's just
Yeah.
my opinion. So who are
I
you
was
picking?
not beating anyone good though, right?
Iowa hasn't? No, they haven't. Iowa is just a team that finds ways to win.
But the only important game, the only good team they played was Penn State, and they lost 31-0.
Yeah, Penn State had 45 minutes and like 30 seconds of possession and like 6 forced turnovers. Just gross. Who are you picking? I'm pretty sure I know who you're picking.
For Michigan, Iowa,
Yeah.
Michigan.
Yes.
Sure.
Yeah, that's fairly obvious. I picked Michigan today to win 45-3, and I think Oregon beats Washington 38-31. Those are my only 2 score predictions for now. I'll probably do score predictions for SEC and Big 12 championship game, maybe. I'll probably try and do the SEC at least, but we'll see. We shall see. Alrighty. Well, we have been on here for 58 minutes. Is there anything else you want to talk about before we get off?
There is nothing. Just it's nice. Both of our teams are in it, man. Conference championship week win. We're probably both in, so it's exciting, man.
Yeah. And someone else, before we get off, asked me a question, SFS inverted. Guys, if I do a live stream tomorrow or Friday, it will be all Q&A, and I will be totally answering your questions. That's something that I'm trying to do a better job at, is like balancing the guest and questions in the chat. SFS inverted. Ohio State does play Oregon next season, and it's at Oregon. My prediction for Ohio State next year is probably going to be either 12-0, 11-1, maybe 10-2. It won't be worse than that. because they could lose everyone. They could return a lot of guys. And Oregon, Michigan, and Penn State, all of whom Ohio State plays, those could all be top 5 teams. Those could be top 6. Those could be top 10. But Ohio State could maybe be number 1. So there's a wide variety of outcomes for OSU next year. And there will be a way too early. I mean, the minute the season ends, SFS Inverted, there's going to be like predictions in January, top 25s in January, playoff picks in January. Like, I will get this stuff sorted out, and maybe I'll do some of it live with you all in December to like get early prep. That'll be fun. So thank you all for coming on, and thank you, Marcus. It's always fun to have you on. If Florida State does match up with anyone in the playoffs, we'll have you back on to preview it and talk about it.
Sounds like a lot of fun. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. All right, everyone. Have a great day. Make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel and click the notification bell. And I will see